At the Environmental Protection Agency, we believe that the environment is everybody's business. We can start caring for our planet by becoming more environmentally friendly in our everyday actions. Here's what you can do. Dispose of waste in a garbage bin. Clean our drains, yards, and carpets regularly. Take a reusable shopping bag to the market. Support local butchers and farmers to reduce packaged waste. Plant a kitchen garden, trees, and flowers. Compost your organic waste. Conserve water and electricity. Carry a reusable water bottle. These little acts are good for your health and that of the environment. Remember, healthy people work better and achieve more, and together, small actions make a big difference. For further information on how you can help, please contact the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, Ganges Street, Sophia, or telephone us at 225-5467. You can also visit our website, epaguyana.org, or our Facebook and Instagram pages.
Miss Sonia, wait, I want to ask you something.
Oh gosh,
Morning, Miss Sonia.
Morning, Miss Cheryl. I'm late for work.
I noticed the other day y'all had a big campaign with them police officers, so shutting down them people barbecue, wedding, dance. Man, how y'all expect these people to make money and survive?
Oh, Miss Cheryl, that is far from the truth. The EPA and the Guyana Police Force are actually working together to ensure that persons who conduct certain businesses and activities are authorized. We've tried to allow them to adhere to the noise regulations.
Well, this gonna be a new law. What law is this?
These laws were always in place. It's now that we're getting all these complaints at the agency, we are trying to enforce them. The Environmental Protection Act has been in place since 1996, and it states that persons and businesses must apply for environmental authorization before operating a sound-making device.
Well, girl, I never know this thing is prior to the law.
So if you're keeping a barbecue or an open-air function, like a wedding or a concert, especially in your community, right, and you're playing a music system, you have to apply for a short-term noise permit. And for persons that operate in a business and you got generators and stuff, you have to apply for a long-term permit. And that is applicable to bars and hotspots and clubs also.
Well, now that you explain it, I understand it. It's unfair to the elderly, sick people, and even them little children.
That is correct. According to the World Health Organization, loud noise can cause stress, sleep deprivation, and hearing impairment. And I'm sure you wouldn't want that.
Oh, now I understand. Thank you for explaining it, Miss Sue.
For more information, you can contact the EPA at 225-5471 or visit our office at Ganges Street, North Sophia, Georgetown.
To 35 kilometers above Earth's surface, a gas called ozone surrounds the planet. The ozone layer acts as a barrier between Earth and ultraviolet radiation from the sun. However, pollution has caused the ozone layer to thin, exposing life on Earth to dangerous radiation. Earth's atmosphere is made up of 6 layers. The second layer, called the stratosphere, contains the ozone layer. The ozone layer is made up of a highly reactive molecule called ozone, which contains 3 oxygen atoms. Ozone is a trace gas in the atmosphere. There are only about 3 molecules for every 10 million molecules of air. But it does a very important job. The ozone layer acts as Earth's sunscreen, absorbing about 98% of damaging ultraviolet or UV light. But the ozone layer has gotten thinner. Chemicals called chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, are the primary culprits in ozone layer breakdown. A CFC is a molecule that contains the elements carbon, chlorine, and fluorine. CFCs are mostly found in refrigerants, aerosols, and plastic products. When CFCs are exposed to ultraviolet rays in the atmosphere, they break down into substances that include chlorine. The chlorine reacts with the oxygen atoms in ozone and rips apart the ozone molecule. Areas of damage in the ozone layer are often called ozone holes, but that name is misleading. Ozone layer damage is more like a thin patch, with the thinnest areas near the poles. The ozone layer above the Antarctic, in particular, has been impacted by pollution since the mid-1980s. There, the region's low temperatures speed up the conversion of CFCs to ozone-damaging chlorine. About 90% of CFCs currently in the atmosphere were emitted by industrialized countries in the Northern Hemisphere. In 1989, the Montreal Protocol banned the production of ozone-depleting substances. Since then, the amount of chlorine and other ozone-depleting elements in the atmosphere have been falling. Scientists estimate that chlorine levels will return to their natural state in about 50 years. By then, the Antarctic ozone hole will shrink to smaller than 8 million square miles.
Hello and welcome to The Environment Matters, a monthly production of the Environmental Protection Agency in Guyana, where we explore the work of the agency in fulfilling its mandate of environmental management and biodiversity conservation. A clean and healthy environment is necessary for productive lives. In this month's episode, we'll take a closer look at one of the fundamental environmental parameters that shapes the work of the agency: air quality. The month of September marks quite a few national and international observances, from Amerindian Heritage Month and Education Month in Guyana to the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies and Ozone Day on the 7th and 16th, respectively. To kickstart our discussion on air quality today is Mr. Zainool Rahaman of the Ozone Unit within the Ministry of Agriculture's Hydromed Department. Mr. Rahaman, welcome to our program.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you on air. We've been working quite a bit over the years together on Ozone Day and, our outreaches surrounding those activities.
Yes.
So start by telling us about the work of the Ozone Unit and what exactly is it that you guys do over there?
Well, when Guyana signed on to the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer, we established a unit within the Hydromed Service, National Ozone Unit, to ensure that Guyana's obligations to that protocol was met. Our country has certain real obligations that we have to meet. These include daily annual reporting of our importation of substances that deplete the ozone layer. Now, a little background there. In terms of the substances that deplete the ozone layer, it was found that it was man-made chemicals really that was doing the destruction in the stratosphere of the ozone layer. And those substances, those chemicals that were man-made, were being used in several areas. They were used in the refrigeration and air conditioning industry, and they were used in the agricultural industry, and also they were used in the firefighting industry. So in the chemical cleaning industry, there were also chemicals that produced substances that would go into the stratosphere and deplete the ozone layer. So the fight had to be fought on several fronts.
Right. So let's just backtrack a bit, because we're talking about ozone layer and substances that deplete the ozone layer. Tell us, what is the ozone layer? Because I've noted during our outreaches over the years, there have been quite a few misconceptions about what is ozone, the ozone layer, its relation to climate change, and so on. So we want to start with basically a blank slate for our audience by saying, what is the ozone layer? What does it do? Why is it important to have an ozone layer?
Okay, well, ozone is a gas. Of course, there's a washing powder, I think, called ozone washing
Ozone,
powder.
yes.
Those are not to be confused. Ozone is a gas that comprises of 3 atoms of oxygen coming together. And they
Yes,
form a
as-
bond,
That's our little Aussie ozone.
Aussie ozone.
Yes.
So therefore, what that does, it resides primarily in the stratosphere. And that ozone is usually caused by natural occurrence when lightning strikes oxygen molecules. The power of the lightning, when it strikes the molecules, it separates them into atoms of oxygen. Those atoms are very reactive. They cannot stay single. So they bond to an oxygen molecule and they form a new substance called ozone. And well, it resides one place on Earth in the stratosphere, but ozone also occurs in the lower atmosphere as a result of the same chemistry, lightning striking oxygen in the lower atmosphere and splitting the molecules of oxygen into atoms, and then ozone formed there. But that ozone does not really help us in what they do in the environment in the stratosphere. That ozone combines with other substances and forms smog, dust particles. In some cities of the world, at certain times during the year, there is a blanket of cloud covering those cities, and it actually blocks out the sunlight, and that is smog. That is not good ozone. It comprises of ozone,
bad
dust
ozone.
particles, and other things because
Okay.
in suspension. However, going back to the ozone in the stratosphere, that's very important for us and for life on Earth because one of its natural functions is to stop UVB radiation from the sun from entering the Earth's atmosphere. And that UVB radiation is very harmful because as it enters into the atmosphere and if it reaches down to Earth, wherever it comes in, these are very high energy waves. So they warm the surface that they incident on. They heat it to very high temperatures, and the energy of the waves can change the molecular structure of living cells.
So that includes humans,
Humans,
animals,
yes.
plants,
Yep,
any living
any
organism.
living thing it was found to be primarily occurring within the polar regions in the Antarctic region of the world. And this would cause, there's a lot of ice there. This would cause melting of the ice. And also when it incidents on animals and humans and plants out there, it will give direct negative environmental impacts. It causes skin cancer in animals and in humans and any other living creature that is out there during the sunlight hours. And also it causes cataract, leading to blindness. Also genetic mutation in plants. Plants can't move, so the plants are
So
there.
they're not necessarily
Mobile.
equipped with the defense. Exactly, they're
Mechanism.
not mobile.
And so therefore, whilst we can take preventative measures by staying indoors during those times of the day when the UVB radiation is highest, and we've got meters to measure that, we've got small instruments, we can measure that. Also, we can use an umbrella, we can cover up by wearing sleeves
Right.
and putting
Or
on
sunscreen.
Sunscreen, yes. Yes. So,
All right.
briefly, the incidence of the UVB radiation is not something very good for the environment. And its impact is far-reaching.
Okay. So tell us then about the famous or infamous hole in the ozone layer and
Oh.
how that came to be, and how concerned should we be at this point about that hole in the ozone layer?
Well, in the late 70s, there were some scientists, and Molina was one of them. He was a lead scientist. They were working under the WMO-funded project to measure the presence of atmospheric ozone within the stratosphere. And they had instruments to measure these concentration of gas all over different places and parts of the equator there, from the equator going north and south. So they found that the ozone layer was weakest in the polar regions due to the wind circulation taking chemicals from the earth, wherever it was released, up into the stratosphere. That's a natural circulation that goes up. So when the wind takes these chemicals up there, they found that the ozone layer was not as thick as in other areas around the globe. This is particularly thin in the polar regions. And so they measured the concentration of gases that was present also. And they found that a lot of CFCs, which is chlorofluorocarbons, were there. And along with the chlorofluorocarbons, they found chlorine atoms freely around the area. Now, chlorine reacts with ozone molecules and destroys them into ozone and an atom.
So that's bad for us, basically.
Yes, and an atom of oxygen. So chlorine now bonds with that atom of oxygen. And one chlorine atom can destroy thousands of molecules of ozone because it keeps doing that all the time. Even though it has a bond already, it keeps destroying. And it lives long in it, has a long lifetime.
In the atmosphere.
In the stratosphere where the ozone layer is, yes.
Okay.
So that was discovered, and then it crafted the Vienna Convention for the protection of the ozone layer, which was done. And then subsequently, when these substances were identified, the Montreal Protocol to reduce the use of substances that deplete the ozone layer was crafted.
Right.
And acceded in 1987 to that protocol.
That's the year I was born.
Well, you shouldn't say that publicly because then they will start calculating.
I'm not one of those who's bothered by my age. I feel indeed fortunate to have reached this age.
Yeah, you seem too young to be burdened with some of these information and these challenges that we're facing. I mean, these things were happening long ago. But over time, with scientists finding out the reason for these destruction of the ozone layer and the chemicals that were causing them, they introduced the protocols to phase out the use of these substances. However, can you imagine a life without a refrigerator, a freezer?
Oh, I can't. I always reach for cold water, and I like cold water.
Cold, right.
Yes,
and
cold beverages.
It's important also. Cooling is important in our daily lives because we enjoy fruits that come from far away, North America. We enjoy foods, frozen foods and so. So they enjoy our fresh frozen fish meats.
Think about life without ice cream.
Right. So how do we do this? Because then the scientists in the lab now became very frantic and began to look for other substances that can replace these chemicals. And they did find a few substances. So we kept industry going.
Yes, indeed. And you know, I always say this is what I like about science, the fact that it's ever evolving.
Yes.
And it gives us more information over time so that we then can make informed decisions because, refrigeration is not only important for the delicacies that we like to enjoy and for keeping our food fresh, it's also important in the scientific community.
Yes.
And, as we continue to grapple with the COVID-19 pandemic, and when we look at the theme for Ozone Day this year, it's important for keeping our vaccines cool.
Yes.
Right? And so you did say that I'm a bit young to be grappling with some of these serious issues in our environment. And it's really important for us to think about the choices that we make today because those, of course, will have an impact on the future generation. And so I'm pretty sure that in the 1950s when we were making all these appliances, we weren't necessarily thinking about, how would this impact the future generation? We were just looking at the innovation of that time. Yes. And so, of course,
Everyone
we need to start.
Excited.
Yeah.
Because, using these chemicals were advantageous because they were so harmless and easy to work with. that technicians and so could have repaired equipment without much protective gear, without taking much precautions, because these substances were so harmless that some of them were used within an equipment, a small piece of equipment that assists breathing, called metered dosage inhalers. Those people who suffer from asthma, they have a little cartridge equipment and with some chemicals to clear their nasal passages and their breathing passages when they have attacks of asthma. And this propellant that is used within that inhaler to carry the drug within the areas that needs to be cleared is also an ozone-depleting substance.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because all the tender tissues down there and all your breathing tubes and so, it can go in there and come back out. It just takes the drug in there, and the drug does its work, and it allows people to live. So,
But
yes, but it damages.
yes.
However, when they designed the protocol, they made sure that there were exemptions for medical use.
Okay.
So, as we speak now, metered dosage inhalers are still being used with an ozone-depleting substances. However, we have phased out over 80% of substances that deplete the ozone layer in Guyana and around the world.
Great. So
It's-
I'm glad that you
it's a-
mentioned that.
Yes.
Because I was going
It's
to
very,
come to
very, very successful environmental protocol. It's actually one of the most successful.
that is what my research has indicated.
Yeah.
And so I was going to come to the question of you mentioning our obligations.
Yes.
And so I know that there's some MEAs, the multilateral environmental agreements, where it's not legally binding. So for the Vienna Convention and the Montreal Protocol, are those provisions legally binding for countries that sign on, or
Yes,
is
partly.
it optional?
Well, of the 198 countries that signed on to the Montreal Protocol, that's the whole UN family that have signed on, have been able to assist meeting the goal of reducing those chemicals that destroy the ozone layer at least by 80%. And the ozone layer is healing.
Wonderful.
Yes,
I
because
think-
it's a natural process of generation of ozone gas in the stratosphere. It's healing. It's filling the holes, actually. So the thinning is decreasing. However, we have to keep our watch and make sure that the substances that we're phasing out aren't reintroduced. And some of the things that we do as part of the agreement is to ensure we maintain the phase-out schedule. Now, if you do not maintain that, then you're not in compliance with the protocol. There is a little penalty there when you're not in compliance, because they have decided that if those parties who are not in compliance will not be allowed to trade with other parties.
Right. So,
So
I was
you
going to
cannot be
ask,
friends
what
with me
is it a
if you're not
financial penalty?
there.
Is it
Yes.
some
It's a
other
trade penalty.
trade penalty?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're
And-
blacklisted for trade.
Okay.
So nobody actually will like that. So because trade is such an important
Yes.
aspect of our lives, where economic transfer of goods and services is necessary for our well-being and our economic growth. It's necessary to have, the wherewithal to be able to trade, because that is what grows the economy of countries.
Yes, and indeed, without trade, as you said, there is no movement
So there
of
is
the
a-
necessary
Yes.
goods and services.
There are incentives also for countries to help them phase out the use of these chemicals. We get funds from the multilateral fund through the United Nations Environment Program and the United Nations Development Program, and we do projects for the phase out the use of these substances, training our technicians for purchasing tools and equipment to train our in the technical schools. So it's not only you're stopping the use of these chemicals and introducing new ones, you're preparing the technicians on the ground to be able to work with the new refrigerants and chemicals in the industry.
Okay, so aside from EPA
Yes.
and those international agencies that you mentioned, which other partners does the Ozone Unit work with? Locally?
Locally,
Yeah.
well, we work a lot with Customs and Excise Department, the Guyana Revenue Authority, because we have two regulations to control the importation of these chemicals. And the regulations are allowing us to reduce our consumption by restricting the importation of these substances.
Okay.
So our first and major partner in this game of phasing out these substances is the customs enforcement arm of the GRA. So we are called regularly to the wharves to ensure that the
Okay.
equipment coming in and the refrigerant gases coming in are allowed in. So
All right.
there is a legislation in place, and also we have quotas that we issue for importers to bring in their ozone depleting substances. But we're phasing down. We are almost 70% down,
Okay.
and we're looking forward to meeting a 97.5 reduction by 2025.
All right.
Just to keep,
I see.
just to keep those equipment going that we have. Whilst new equipment are coming in, industries are retooling, and the other equipment that's coming in are more energy efficient. So they use less energy.
So you have to
in
look for
doing the
that
same
label.
work. Yes, yes. And also, therefore, what they do, they reduce energy consumption. So they reduce our carbon footprint too. That's one of the things. The Montreal Protocol and the ozone treaties help countries with climate change because some of these chemicals are also high global warming gases.
Right, those greenhouse gases that
that
capture,
capture
the sun's heat
the heat and
or
make it-
energy.
yes,
Yeah.
and blocks it from leaving our atmosphere.
Oh,
So-
so I hope then persons can now make that connection between ozone depletion, and
Yes.
climate change, at least for the little bit that we
yes.
discussed.
At first, when the new chemicals were introduced to stop the destruction of the ozone layer, it was fine and they were very welcomed in the industry. However, some of those substances were found out to be high in global warming potential. Some of them were 2,000 plus times more potent than carbon dioxide, the same volume per volume of each one. And some of them have long atmospheric life. So they will live 10 years in the atmosphere. They will remain there for so long before they disintegrate and be reduced to other substances or the parent substance that they were made from.
Okay, so
And that brings us to the Kigali Amendment.
I don't want to say on a scale of 1 to 10, but if you were to give Guyana a score, a report card,
A report card.
yes, do we get an A? A for effort?
Yes, because
Yes.
we have worked with our partners, the Customs Revenue Department, GRE, the Environment Protection Agency, to spread public awareness, because much of this could not have been done without the public being involved. With our training institute, with the Ministry of Education, with Guy Suko, and the others that do training in refrigeration and air conditioning, and our partners, our international partners who support us, United Nations Environment, and the United Nations Development Program. So holistically, with all of those players, we've been able to give ourselves an A.
Great.
An A plus, because we are a developing country, and whilst our population is small and our per capita consumption of these substances is not high, we still have to live, and we still have to do many of the things we want to do, like exporting our fish, our seafood, and so on. So we have to make sure that those industries, our beverage manufacturers,
Are compliant.
are compliant with our obligations. But there's been a new trend where they're starting to introduce natural refrigerants more. In industry, they use ammonia gas for cooling. Ammonia occurs naturally. it has a very low global warming, zero ozone depleting. So for big industries, ice making, and so they're using that. And for other small applications, refrigerators, freezers, fridges, they're using hydrocarbon, propane, and they're using butane, which is found in natural gas. So they are very low in global warming potential, 3, and they live in the atmosphere for less than a year.
Yeah, so some of those natural gases that you mentioned brought another project to mind that I'm pretty sure we'll talk about at some other time
Yes.
on the program. So, with the little time that we have left, walk us through the Kigali Amendment. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, Kigali Amendment. The Kigali Amendment was drafted in the Kigali city, the capital of Rwanda, in 2016, and it entered into force January 4th, 2019. That amendment to the Montreal Protocol seeks now to phase out those gases and chemicals that are used in industry, that while they may not be ozone depleting, they have high global warming potential, which is worrying. And as we see the severity of storms and the impacts of storms and storm events around the earth, around the globe, they're getting stronger and stronger. Now, these storms, they're natural events. However, because of global warming and heating of the oceans, increased heating, and so these storms get more energy.
Yeah.
And when they have the energy, the winds become higher, speed winds, faster velocity, the damage is more. The rainfall intensity increases because the storms get bigger. Hurricanes, typhoons, and so that affect us around the world, and tornadoes all will benefit from the increased energy in the atmosphere and become stronger. That is very dangerous. So Kigali now addresses those substances that are high in global warming and introduces the other chemicals that we can use that are low in global warming and still non-ozone depleting.
Okay, and still be able to serve the function in the appliances that we use.
So that for World Ozone Day this year, the theme is Montreal Protocol, keeping us, our food and vaccine cool. Because if your temperature changes, the air temperature gets warmer, then you feel more uncomfortable, then you look for more air conditioned and cooling.
Oh yes, and then of course.
Of course you want more cold drinks, and then you want more beverages that are
and
frozen.
It's more energy that we're using, and we have to look at the sources of energy that we use.
Because when we do the energy generation, we burn more fuel, we put more carbon dioxide in the air. Kigali also looks at energy efficiency of appliances and equipment. So it's a double whammy, win-win situation.
Indeed it is. And I do believe with the Montreal Protocol being one of, if not the most successful international agreement, it can serve the purpose of helping the Paris Accord and other climate change agreements that were made.
Because many countries have not been able to keep their part of the bargain due to circumstances that they claim is not giving their economic benefits. So therefore, they will not shut down a factory, they will not turn off an energy plant or so, because when they do so, there is not enough energy to drive their industry, to make goods and so.
All right. Well, the energy mix is definitely something worth exploring, and I know that Guyana is.
Yes.
I shouldn't say on the path because we've already done so, but we've already looked at our energy mix and to see where we can green our energy generation.
Yes.
All right. So, Mr. Rahaman, that brings us to the end of our discussion on ozone and the importance. Is there anything that you want to leave with our audience?
Well, the thing is that Guyana is a technology taker. We do not manufacture refrigerators, freezers, and cooling equipment. We buy. The developed world has the technology and they make the product. And each product that is made carries a label with instructions and a manual of operation. And we have tried to train our technicians to service those equipment. And the consumers shouldn't be afraid of buying a refrigerator or freezer that has propane or butane gas inside. While those gases are flammable, they're very good refrigerants. And they're good ones they keep contained within the system. The system is sealed, it will not leak so easily. So therefore, when you're having your appliance serviced, my appeal to the consumers out there is to have a certified technician or a licensed technician to service your equipment.
All right, and there's a list of those technicians available from the Ozone Unit?
Yes, and we have it on our blog site at hydromed.gov.gy. There is a list of retrofitters, licensed technicians. So you can go on that site and get the names of the technicians that are licensed to do repairs and so. We hope that most of our technicians will now come on board and get trained and become licensed also.
All right.
So for consumers out there, that is very important, that when you, like say for example, your refrigerator isn't freezing or so, you may know a neighbor next door or somebody who can have a look at it and so. But the technology has evolved beyond certain standards. So you need to be very careful who you ask to look at and troubleshoot your equipment.
All right. So thank you very much for that sound advice, Mr. Rahaman. Remember, when you're going to the supermarkets as well, look for the ozone-friendly products in the can. Look for the Energy Star labels when you're shopping for your appliances. And of course, get that list of certified or licensed technicians who will ensure that we take the ozone layer in mind when we are repairing and fixing our appliances. Stay tuned and we'll be right back.
Every year, pollution kills millions of people around the world. That's because we breathe in toxic air, we eat fish laden with mercury, and we drink from rivers clogged with plastics. These issues are so common, we've begun to accept them. But did you know that you have a right to a clean environment? Every day, people can use the law and their purchasing power to press governments and businesses to respect Mother Nature. Air. Everybody should have a right to clean air. But airborne pollution is one of the biggest health risks of our time. It kills more than 7 million people every year and is a driving force behind climate change. How can you combat air pollution? Ask your government to provide data on the air quality in your region. In many places, you have a right to that information. Call on your leaders to fulfill their obligations to regulate and, in some cases, ban pollutants, like those emitted from heavy industries. Claim your right for clean air. Clean air is our human right. Pollution affects almost every aspect of life on Earth. But when people exercise their environmental rights, we have a fighting chance to beat pollution and to ensure the health of our planet. Do your part. Claim your right to a safe and healthy life. It is our human right.
Pollution is the largest environmental risk to global public health. It is estimated that 92% of the world's population is exposed to polluted air, causing an estimated 7 million deaths per year. Polluted air particularly affects children, the elderly, and women, with increased links to diseases such as dementia, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and COVID-19. Clean air is one of the necessities for leading a healthy and productive life. Following the international community's increasing interest in clean air and emphasizing the need to make efforts to improve air quality to protect human health, the United Nations General Assembly on September 7 designated it the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. Last year, the first ever International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies with the rights-based theme of Clean Air for All was launched. The theme for this year's International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies is Healthy Air, Healthy Planet, which emphasizes the health impacts of air pollution, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. The day aims to prioritize the need for healthy air while keeping the conversation broad enough to encompass other critical issues such as climate change, human and planetary health, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. It sends a rallying call to action to collectively align efforts and claim the right to clean air.
Welcome back to The Environment Matters. Thank you for staying tuned with us. If you're now joining us in the first half of our program, our guest, Mr. Zainool Rahaman of the Ozone Unit that is within the Hydromet Department of the Ministry of Agriculture, was shedding some light on the ozone layer and Guyana's actions to help protect that very important ozone layer. If you missed the program, remember to head on over to our YouTube channel where you can watch this and other episodes of The Environment Matters, and remember to subscribe for new content. Joining me in studio now is Ms. Tashana Redmond. She is a Senior Environmental Officer at the EPA, and she is going to talk to us about air quality from the EPA's perspective, of course, and the work of the agency that helps to maintain good air quality in Guyana. Tashana, welcome again to the show, because I know you've been here before talking about noise.
So the Environmental Protection Agency, under the Environmental Protection Act and its air quality regulations, is mandated to ensure good air quality for the nation. The regulations require that any facility that releases air contaminants be authorized by the agency. So over the years, the agency has been working assiduously to ensure that we effectively managed all sources of air contaminants. So a number of industries would be sources. They would have point sources of emissions or stationary sources of emissions, and we have been working to have those regulated. Primarily the power generation sector. Several facilities have their personal generators, and they are also authorized by the agency. This is our primary source of point source emissions in country, generators.
All right. So what are typical examples, aside from the generators, power generators, what are some typical examples of projects that are authorized specifically dealing with air quality?
So it's primarily projects, as I indicated earlier, your power generation facilities. And a lot of other companies would have, despite their primary focus may not be power generation, they're supported by power generation.
Okay.
So you may have a mining facility, for example, they run their power generation systems. So they have those point sources of emissions. Incinerators are also another source of air contaminants being released into the environment. And with the increase in the management of hazardous waste, you have those thermal treatment facilities also being a source of air contaminants. So those are the primary sources we manage in country: generators, incinerators, and other thermal forms of treatment of hazardous waste.
All right, so we're talking about air contaminants. What are the air contaminants that you seek to regulate, if that's the right term that I used?
Yes, you did use the right term there. The World Health Organization has indicated that approximately 9 out of 10 persons do not breathe clean air. And the air is generally contaminated with particulate matter. Particulate matter comes basically in two sizes. You have PM 2.5 and PM 10. The one of greater concern is PM 2.5, which can make its way into our respiratory system and affect our health and well-being. Also of concern is sulfur oxide and nitrogen oxides. These are also contaminants of concern. And we're also concerned with carbon monoxide and ground level ozone. So there is the ozone that Mr. Rahaman would have talked about, and then there's ground level ozone. And ground level ozone basically forms as a result of two air contaminants coming together, which is nitrogen oxides and VOCs, or volatile organic compounds, in the presence of sunlight. So we definitely need to ensure, and ground level ozone is a threat to the environment. So we definitely have to take steps to ensure that our operations are managed effectively so that we can contain those air contaminants. So nitrogen oxides generally are formed during the combustion of fuel, again, which comes from our power generation sectors.
All right. I want for us to touch very quickly on complaints.
Okay.
Because of course we can't have a discussion about environmental management and air quality without talking about complaints and how does EPA manage complaints relating to air pollution?
So the agency does receive complaints related to air pollution. It generally pales in comparison to our noise complaints. Noise is definitely the hot topic. The complaints we receive regarding air pollution is generally linked to smoke. Exposure to smoke, and that exposure comes from burning generally. Burning from regular burning of garbage, the use of firesides, sometimes burning of an area for land clearing. So the burning of, in one way or the other, generally tends to be the source of complaints related to air pollution. The other source is the automobile repair shops. So they are, or the spray painting shops as we call. When we enter our vehicles and we want them to look brand new, we take them there. And the chemicals that they utilize to restore our vehicles tends to be a source of fumes that persons generally cannot tolerate. And those tend to be a source of the VOCs that I mentioned earlier. So the complaints that we received are generally linked to spray painting shops, the generators, and the burning, whether it's a fireside, burning of garbage, or sometimes burning for land clearance.
Tashana, you are a senior environmental officer that is attached to the technical services unit of the agency, and that unit works to support the work of other program areas within the agency. And so as the EPA looks to, really pay more attention to complaints management, not that we haven't been doing so, but we're really looking to ramp up our efforts to resolving complaints. How important now is the work of the technical services unit in that effort?
Well, the Technical Services Department is focused on research and development, environmental monitoring, and tracking trends. So our support to the other program areas will be in the form of providing guidelines and codes of practice that can aid in reducing environmental pollution. Sometimes persons are guilty of the activity because they do not have the necessary information and the tools to do better. So by developing guidelines, we can assist in providing appropriate practical mitigation measures that can be implemented to ensure and reduce in particular the air contaminants released from operation. Additionally, through our monitoring capabilities, we can determine whether or not the air contaminants being emitted are above the maximum allowable limits. The thing about it is that air contaminants and other things are ever present. What matters is at what concentrations there are within the atmosphere. So particulate matter has a threshold to determine whether or not it poses a significant risk to human health and the environment. So by monitoring particulate matter in the environment, we can determine whether or not this is something that really needs to be monitored, to be mitigated, to be improved, or though it may seem like it's a bother, it may not necessarily be posing a risk to your health and well-being because it's below the allowable limits.
All right, so in wrapping up, because I know this is a very quick discussion, it's in no way indicative of the depth of work that is carried out by the Technical Services Unit Department when we're talking about air quality. But of course, as I said, you know, we cannot have a discussion on air quality without at least mentioning what the agency does. And so for the ordinary person man in the street, what words of advice would you impart to encourage persons when it comes to having clean air?
In the case of transportation, you don't necessarily always have to drive. You can walk, you can bike. You can do what we've been saying for quite some time now. Do not burn your garbage. Utilize waste disposal service to get rid of your garbage. Also, your consumption of electricity. Your demand means there is more burning somewhere else. So check how you're using your electrical devices.
I know, especially those appliances that require heat. Your microwave, your iron.
Things that you can do to reduce your energy use, and ultimately your energy use is also linked to the release of air contaminants as a result of power generation.
Remember to keep updated on the work of the agency by following us on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Remember to pick up a copy of the Sunday Times and the Guyana Chronicle to read our weekly column. Tune into our bi-weekly radio interviews and visit the EPA's website. We currently have a little survey going on. We're trying to improve our website to make it more user-friendly and to make it more appealing to you. Remember to stay safe. Wear a mask, sanitize often, and remember to respect each other and the environment. Thank you for staying tuned.
Miss Sonia, wait, I want to ask you something.
Oh gosh,
Morning, Miss Sonia.
Morning, Miss Cheryl. I'm late for work.
I noticed the other day y'all had a big campaign with them police officers, so shutting down them people barbecue, wedding, dance. Man, how y'all expect these people to make money and survive?
Oh, Miss Cheryl, that is far from the truth. The EPA and the Guyana Police Force are actually working together to ensure that persons who conduct certain businesses and activities are authorized. We've trying to allow them to adhere to the noise regulations.
Well, this gotta be a new law. What law is this?
These laws were always in place. It's now that we're getting all these complaints at the agency, we are trying to enforce them. The Environmental Protection Act has been in place since 1996, and it states that persons and businesses must apply for environmental authorization before operating a sound-making device.
Well, girl, I never know this thing is part of the law.
So if you're keeping a barbecue or an open-air function, like a wedding or a concert, especially in your community, right, and you're playing a music system, you have to apply for a short-term noise permit. And for persons that operate in a business and you got generators and stuff, you have to apply for a long-term permit. And that is applicable to bars and hotspots and clubs also.
Well, now that you explain it, I understand it. It's unfair to the elderly, sick people, and even them little children.
That is correct. According to the World Health Organization, loud noise can cause stress, sleep deprivation, and hearing impairment. And I'm sure you wouldn't want that.
Oh, now I understand. Thank you for explaining it, Miss Sue.
For more information, you can contact the EPA at 225-5471 or visit our office at Ganges Street, North Sophia, Georgetown.